Second episode of our new World Politics show. That's right. We'll be talking about politics, definitely in the United States, but around the world as well. And as y'all know, we love doing polls here on Pod TV and using LinkedIn and all of those sources. So we did World's Worst President and had some interesting results. I think at the end, Biden wound up slipping in and pulling the victory from Trump's mouth and all of that. The last time we did it, it had all these discussions about politics and all along this lines. Well, this time we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to do a mock poll. We're going to have a cultural figure. We're going to have a Pod TV representative. I'm sorry, Adam, you're not on the first ballots, but we will have you on the second ballots, and then we will have two actual candidates that are actually running. So this time around, we put in none other than I'll tell you who the two real politicians are, but let me tell you who the Pod TV representative is. The Pod TV representative in this first one is Lee Newton Rhodes. So Lee Newton Rhodes is a candidate. He's an actual candidate for president. So he's actually running for president, and he is our representative for the Pod TV polls and all along those lines. Our cultural representative this time around, none other, because I was making a joke with our good friend Nick, because we were having a whole conversation around Sesame Street. So I decided that, hey, why not? Let's make Oscar the Grouch a candidate. So Oscar the Grouch is the other candidate. And then our actual candidates that are actually running for president are none other than Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. So these are our various candidates. And it's very early in the polling. But right now, without any kind of competition, I think they're winning by the majority. And it's a small majority because the voting has just started. And I'm curious to see what Adam has to think about this. He might be in the next round and all along those lines. But you'll be glad to know, and Kim is already knowing the results, as are some of the other folks. But our early winner, Oscar the Grouch. So Oscar the Grouch has taken the lead. Folks want Oscar the Grouch to be president and all along those lines. So we've got Kim Calhoun with us, one of the founders of the network, Adam Lampiello, who is definitely a political person and has got some political aspirations of his own. We've got Jim Eade from over there in California, a chess master and doing a lot of other great things. And we've got Rick Rosner, who is a Mensa person and has also written for Jimmy Kimmel and has got a show here on the network where he represents kind of the liberal view. His friend Lance, who is the artist, represents kind of the conservative view, and they go back and forth and everything. But what do you think? Oscar the Grouch for president and all along those lines. So Adam, your thoughts, because we did an early poll. And like I said, it's early voting, so he may lose this lead right now. But in the early voting, Oscar the Grouch is winning.
I'll say I love Oscar the Grouch. He was a very inspirational character. I'd vote for Oscar the Grouch, but the only person who I would vote for, aside from Oscar the Grouch, is Donald Trump, who in 2024 will be our next president. And I tell you, it's going to be great for the economy, great for border security, great for international relations, great for corporations, and great for people who want to pay lower taxes and have a happier life.
All right, so I want to talk about polls quickly.
Yes.
Donald Trump's net disapproval right now is about double, 16%, than what it was during the 2020 election, when it was 8% net disapproval. So that's something liberals can take hope from. On the other hand, Biden's lead at this point, in like 2019, was about 8 to 10 percentage points over Trump. And now they're virtually tied. So that's something liberals can despair over. But in general, polls are just a frickin' mess. Most polls are no more legitimate than polling about Oscar the Grouch, because 30 years ago, one person in three would say yes if they got a phone call about taking a poll. Now it's about one person in 500. And if only one person in 500 is saying yes to being polled, that person might be crazy. The poll results are bad. They're much less reliable than they used to be. And I don't know how to fix it. And I mean, the one way to fix it is to, vote for who you want, get your friends out there to vote, get everybody to vote.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everybody should vote. That's certainly the right. And the franchise is something that people have fought for and died for, and it's something that I wonder if Ron DeSantis approves of Oscar the Grouch. I mean, he might have a real problem with him. I'm clear. I've been clear that if you vote for Trump, you're un-American. So I'll put that out there.
I've been delighting in what's happening with Ron DeSantis because I don't like the guy. He's gone from being the preferred candidate of more than 40% of Republicans in January to being the preferred candidate of only 14% of Republicans today.
Yeah, regardless of the polls, however, he's definitely done a nosedive. There's clearly a lack of support, and you see that with the big money. Because it's the dark money, especially, that's hard to track. But they moved off of DeSantis. They're not backing him anymore. And they were, because they were scrambling. Anyone but Trump was with the big team, like the Koch brothers.
Just today in the polls, Trump has hit his highest percentage ever among Republicans in this election cycle. Trump is the preferred candidate of 55% of Republican voters and the second place person is DeSantis at 14%, and then it's Ramaswamy at 7%. So obviously Trump is going to be the Republican nominee unless, he runs afoul of the 14th Amendment. And even so, he'll probably still be the nominee.
It is a sad state of affairs. But, Nikki Haley and Chris Christie are Republicans. They're Republicans that are part of the old GOP, which could be respectable. And, if either of those candidates were nominated, I could understand that the Republicans could hold their head high at least. But if they're going to back a soon to be, he's certainly an indicted, and he might be convicted by the time he runs for president. So I just don't understand, why they want to lose, because they're certainly trying to.
Hey, sex scandals, convicted criminals, hanging out with, child molesters. They all get voted for, It doesn't matter. This is America.
People like it. Yeah. Some people like it.
Are you talking about Bill Clinton and Hunter Biden?
I think that there are a lot of idiots that need to be removed from elections, a lot of uneducated people. And watching Trump's speech truly showed how uneducated a lot of these people really are when you sit there
how
and
uneducated he is.
Totally divide us. He always talks about us and himself, me, us. When I become president, I'm going to indict 1,000,000 times against Biden. I'm going to indict and get back my justice. I mean, it's all about him. It's not about what can we do to make America great again. He thinks by making himself justified, he makes America great again. And everything he said was, we're going to win and we're going to destroy them. Well, who's them? Is that the people like me who go, you know what, Trump, I'm just tired of your mouth running. I want somebody that can get the job done, that's smart. So who is them, right?
Someone who believes in democracy.
When he was in Nebraska, it was very scary. He almost slipped and he said, yeah, and you just better be careful when you come to Nebraska and then he realized, and he started rambling on and on and on about something else. But he realized, but he was going to, if you come here and you're not for me, they're going to beat you up. So, right. I mean, I just, it's an us and them with him. It's not about unite. And I want somebody who unites us.
Well, Sasha, you're from Canada and you're too polite to just jump in. So what do you think?
Oh, that's right. And Mark's not here. Oh, there's Mark.
Yeah,
Mark,
right.
I'd like to introduce Sasha.
Yes.
He's been with the network for a very long time, has some very good political views, as well as some world news that he does for us from Ukraine to Russia. Welcome, Sasha.
Thank you. Well, you know that in my programs, I do a lot of comments and information about the Ukrainian-Russian war. And so from that perspective, I've heard a very interesting comment on Russian language program, they were commenting on the first debate, the Republican debates. And they were saying that it was quite engaging, very interesting program. And until there was some kind of a kid, it's kind of a poor man's Trump. And I don't remember. He says, I don't remember what was his name. Something like Vivek, something Kama Sutra or something. And
Not quite.
and yeah, it's something different. No, he says, no, it's not Kama Sutra, but something close to it. Anyway,
Ramaswamy.
yeah. So there was interesting dialogue, of course, between him and Nikki Haley, and I think she performed absolutely magnificently well. And from that point on, from our perspective, from the Ukrainian war perspective, of course, she's preferred candidate to become a president. The dilemma of Republicans, in my opinion, is that Democrats are very weak. Biden is absolutely horrible, and it will be a pity if he will be elected the president. It will be just horrifying. However, if he will be facing Donald Trump, he will win easily. And you know why? Because the Republicans are still hanging to the slogan that election was stolen and all this crap. And they're tuning, okay, it works for Republican voters. But this is what, 30%, 32%, whatever, they will vote for Trump regardless. But what you do with the rest of almost 70%, how you will increase your 30, 32% to even 40, 45%, never mind that. It's impossible. You have to be creative. You have to possibly get somebody else instead of Donald Trump. But I don't know who. Nikki Haley looks quite presidential, but I'm not sure that American people are ready for a woman president. I don't know. Maybe they're ready. Maybe they're not. Because there was at one point Hillary Clinton was very close to become a first lady president. It didn't happen. So maybe it will happen this time. And by the way, CNN poll indicated that she would win against Biden a 6% advantage. It's a quite serious 6%. Now, 2%, 3% is okay, but 6%, it's very serious. And she scored better than any other Republican candidate. Whether she will become a choice of Republicans, we'll see. But essentially, Republicans, if they will be better organized, they could easily get the leader. I wouldn't say the right leader. I would say one who can win election. And it's not Donald Trump, obviously. And they could easily win election and defeat Democrats, especially if Joe Biden will be participant in election. Now, except Joe Biden, they don't have second choice. They don't have third choice. They don't have nobody except Joe Biden. So it's all.
I mean, there's also Robert Kennedy and everything. I was going to introduce.
No.
We got another young lady that has joined us as well. She's a regular on our World Edition and all in that space. She's actually Kim's secret sister, since they have that whole blog thing going on and all along those lines. But Debbie Peterson is a former mayor there in California and all along those lines, and is definitely one that addresses corruption in politics with her books that she has written and all along those lines. And one thing we were talking about, I'd love to hear her thoughts as well as Adam, was Mitt Romney just recently stepped down, and one of the things he said was that he would like to see more young leadership and all into that space. So he was actually asking for there to be some youth voice to come in and all along those lines. So Adam, what's your thoughts? You could be one of those young leaders. And Debbie, do we need to get more folks that look like Adam in their 20s and 30s kind of age range and all in that space?
Yeah, Adam, run for office. I think Romney really lifted the bar, and I'm really happy to see that happen. And I really appreciate him stepping down. And well, I don't. I'm sorry he stepped down, because he's an honest. He appears to me to be an honest politician, which we need more of.
He's reasonable.
But you know, it's interesting. The United Nations and Gallup for 20 years now have been doing a world happiness study, and they've polled millions of people all over the world. And of those millions of people, the ones in the countries that are happiest are the ones that have nearer 50% representation of women. They have a higher level of women represented. And those are also the countries that had lower levels of COVID. And the people are happier, the men and the women. They're pulling men and women alike. And so I think that there really is room for us in this country to have some of the Bidens and the Trumps step aside, let some of the younger ones have a go at it, and see if they can do better. And particularly let some of those folks be women.
So if
I
you
agree.
look at the Vegas odds, it's highly likely that the two candidates will be Trump and Biden. In 2012, Sarah Silverman told young people to go to Florida and get their elderly grandparents to vote for Obama. I would like to see a reverse thing. I want boomers to do apology tours. I want boomers like myself to apologize to young people for owning everything and kind of messing up a lot of stuff and begging young people to get out and vote and save us.
Yeah. I'm with
I
you,
agree.
Ray.
Adam, any thoughts about that? You're the youngest representative here and everything. So any thoughts about this apology tour that Rick wants us boomers and others to go on?
Young people are lazy, they're entitled, they're narcissistic, and they come from universities that are almost uniformly left that are not teaching them actually anything about the real world. 2024, look, I'm not a fan of Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. But we need a businessman in the White House, not a politician. And when Trump was, now James, relax. There's even more.
Six bankruptcies later, yes.
If Trump is,
And how much is he worth?
Not as much as he thinks.
Stop it.
Hold on, everybody.
Let me finish.
Financial records
Yeah, let Adam
released by
finish.
Trump show that he has been from 1985 through 2015. Trump lost more money than any other business person in the United States.
Thank
He
goodness
is
it's that,
literally
Rich.
America's
and
worst
I believe those.
businessman.
I believe that. Right. So you look. Like I said, I didn't vote for Trump. I don't like his temperament. I don't like his personality. But I do acknowledge, since I'm the only one here being intellectually honest, that under Trump we had a really good economy. We had a low tax rate for individuals and corporations. We had a more secure border. We had better trade agreements. We had Supreme Court justices that actually interpret the Constitution. We had someone who actually put a COVID vaccine on. Well, we had no wars.
We had more people unemployed.
We had low gas prices.
We had more people.
And we didn't have somebody who was having oral sex in the Oval Office.
May I ask
We
So
had
I
more
gotta tell you,
people unemployed in 2020.
This is
Sasha's
what
got a quick
liberals
question.
do.
One
When
second,
liberals
Sasha's
hear
got
the
a quick
truth,
question.
they just
At any other
interrupt
time.
Adam,
and they go crazy.
you're beyond help. Okay, I got you. I know.
Hold on a second.
Cognitive
Time out.
behavioral
Time out. We
therapy
got a
and
quick question
Prozac.
from Sasha.
Adam,
So Sasha, your quick
Because
question.
Pretty funny,
This is
Adam.
what liberals do when I try to
Yeah,
make an
yeah,
opinion.
this is what
Adam,
liberals
I
do,
don't
right?
want to
Lie
argue
like
with
you.
everything what
Come
you
on.
said. In
Hold on.
defense-
Time out. We're going to
You
hear
guys
from
must
Sasha.
be from California.
Okay, I don't want to argue with everything what you just said about Trump's accomplishment.
New England.
Well, I
But-
didn't get to finish.
But well, from what I heard is I have only one question. How comes a successful businessman with a great economy and so on, how he could have two impeachments, lost Senate, lost House, lost presidency, was involved in insurrections? You're talking about really a garbage man. That's really all what
Yeah.
he is.
I mean, he
When
took this
after his five or
Well, he
six
asked me a question.
after his 5 or 6 bankruptcies, it's all well documented. He was not zero worth. He was minus $250 million. He lost everything what his father left him with, and he came back only through Russian mafia money that were channeled to him through the Deutsche Bank. And the Deutsche Bank paid his fine $36 billion for that. So this is the source of his money, whatever he still has left.
You're being educated,
Not
Adam.
much. garbage.
You should
Okay?
listen.
So
You know
then,
what, James? Let me
even
tell
if
you.
he had
I-
brilliant economy, how you can vote for this garbage?
Yeah.
So
You know,
Trump was
And
the
he
first.
didn't vote for him. He didn't vote for
Do I
him.
get to
Wait,
respond?
that
Trump
vote
was
bump.
He's just indicating some points and
Yeah,
values
I
of what
understand.
their supporters are
Okay.
doing, because somebody has to speak about Trump here anyway.
Yeah,
Trump
and if
was
I
the
could just
first-
respond, but Rick, go ahead.
Trump was the first president since Herbert Hoover in 1932 to leave office with fewer Americans employed than when he took office. More Americans were unemployed in 2020 under Trump than at any other time in America before
Why?
and since,
Why?
because of COVID. But
Thank you.
But
Case
COVID, Trump politicized COVID, and I believe made it worse than it had to be.
I don't want to hear excuses
Well,
from anyone that Trump, got hit by blindsided, because every president's going to get blindsided with something. It's how you handle it and
With a
deal
novel
with it.
virus.
He
Yeah.
had an opportunity to hire back a pandemic team, get control of the situation. A
Which he
lot of the
fired.
rest of the world, I ran the statistics, even if you cut the deaths in half, we still rank higher in deaths than anyone else in the world. Because I listen to people and they go, well, they weren't really recording the deaths properly. But I know so many doctors and I work with them and I respect them. And I don't think they just said, oh, they came in with COVID and they died of something else, but we're going to put COVID.
Yes, they
I don't think my doctors I know and love and respect did that. I think that they all reported things accordingly and how someone died. I think that we did have a mass of deaths. We still have them. We're going back into another COVID hurricane right now. I was at the doctor's office today and at the cancer center, and they are now requiring masks at the cancer center as well as on the buses. Not for fear of just spreading, but they want to protect the cancer patients and the very sick people. And out of respect, I wear them. I put it on, no arguing, because out of respect of some people who have fear. But he had an opportunity to make something great, and it was his ego that he put in front of everything, as opposed to what was the best for the country, just like he's doing in his speeches right now. His speeches
I
are
was
all
actually going
about
to get to one of those speeches and
That's
everything,
all about
because I
him.
know that Adam mentioned
all
it
about
earlier.
him.
Before I
The
get
vice
to that,
president we've
before I
ever
get to
had.
that, I had a quick question for Adam based on something that I've been hearing and everything, and it's
Go ahead.
actually,
Respond.
in some ways, it's scary, and it comes back to a point that you made on the first edition of World Politics, which is on Tuesday. And I know you talked about having these regulations and these requirements for voting, and I can hear that, and I can see some reasons for that. I can also see some problems, because remember the history of the poll taxes and everything. But there was a great resignation. We talked about that with the employees, and a lot of people decided that they were staying at home and things of that nature. I can tell you that in the last several days, I've had some conversations, including one on a show that is here on the network, where people were seeing the hope and the promise of election folks in politics, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, and they are very frustrated now, because I can tell you that there is at least one co-host on this network that has told me that the last time they voted was 2008, and they have no intentions of voting ever again. One of their fellow panelists on the show voted the last election and said that they probably won't vote this election. And there are some other people that I've been in touch with that said that they are not going to vote, partially because of the age and who is running, and partially because they just feel that politicians are full of a bunch of bullshit and that they're not going to do anything for them in that run. So Adam, as a young person, what would you say to those folks that are basically resigning from the political landscape and the political wheel? Because this is not a outlier. I think that this is something that we're going to see more of, where folks are frustrated, even though there was record turnout at the last election. I do not expect a record turnout in this election, because I think a lot of people are frustrated on both the left and the right. But your thoughts about this, and what would you say to those
people
folks?
are frustrated on the left and the right, and I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but they're frustrated because of how divisive our politics has become. I mean, look, I don't believe in the right to vote, and I've been very clear about that. I do not believe that morons should be allowed to vote. If you're a member of the KKK, you don't get a right to vote. If you're a racist or a sexist or a homophobic jerk, you don't get a right to vote. Okay? I don't believe that we should be allowed. And if you're a high school jock who smokes weed and is obsessed with the captain of the cheerleading team, I don't think you should be allowed to vote, because these are people who, A, harbor deep embedded prejudices that's despicable, and otherwise people with no information to make an informed decision about who to vote for. But in response to the other comments,
But how do you legislate that? How do you?
He's an authoritarian. It's obvious. Yeah.
you know, James, I got to tell you, I probably don't agree with anything that you say, but I really like you. You seem like a very cool person, so I'll say that.
Thanks, Adam.
But what I'd like to say is, you know, I want to, you know, Kimberly talks about COVID. Let's hope that, you know, remember Governor Cuomo taking people into those nursing homes where we had catastrophes. But I want to take this time to thank President Trump, for example, for the low gas prices, for no wars, for a COVID vaccine, for Brett Kavanaugh, and for Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, for fair trade agreements, for securing the border, for lower tax rates for individuals and corporations, and for a better economy. I was doing a lot better under Trump than I am under Biden. And I want to thank Trump for not having an affair in the Oval Office with an intern.
You're one of the few
you guys criticize Trump like he's the worst
Adam.
thing on the face of the earth. The truth of the matter is, every single person.
When he says the truth of the matter is, deserve to be lied
the worst
to.
person on the face of the earth. I didn't even vote for the guy, but I do recognize he did some good things, and his policies are far better than Biden's.
Why didn't
the
you vote for
unemployment
him?
rate?
Why
How
didn't
did
you?
the
Why don't we add
Lowest
that?
African American and Hispanic
Adam, and you're
rate
making
in
it
history under Trump.
believable. I know you're
Hold on a
young.
second, hold on a
You
second.
can
Time out
learn to
again.
tell the
I want to
truth.
answer Rick's question.
Time out again, because hold on a second, Adam. Time out, because one of the things that folks will find shocking, because I even found it shocking, the program that I was talking about earlier that the folks were thinking about not voting is actually, because I'm not hiding it, it's on the network. Go watch the network. It was actually Real Girls Rock, which is a show run by an African-American women, and most of the folks that were on that, all the folks on the panel were African-American and everything along those lines. There were several people that were in the business community. This might surprise you, Adam, that I'm actually going to bring this up. They were in the business community that actually agreed with you. They felt that Trump did more for them as African-American entrepreneurs than the other presidents that had existed. So they actually brought that up. I didn't bring it up because I was only producing the show.
Right.
This was a
They're not
valid
right,
point
but
that they
they're
brought up.
entitled
They
to their
felt
point
that
of
they
view.
were giving more opportunities within the business lanes under Trump than under others. And like I said, this was their viewpoint. That's not
So,
necessarily one that I
let
agree
me
with all
ask
the
you
way.
this question.
It's a
Let me ask
minority
this to,
viewpoint from what I've heard.
if
from
I can ask this to
black
James, and if I
businessmen.
can ask Rick and James this question, is it possible that maybe what I'm saying is, you know, partially true, and what you're saying is partially true, and the truth is somewhere in the middle?
So
Absolutely, it's
yeah,
possible.
Trump didn't do everything wrong, but there have been 4 surveys of presidential historians, people whose job it is to know, you know, history. And in those 4 surveys, Trump came out ranked last, second to last, third to last, and 4th worst president by people, both liberal and conservative. Yeah, they're academics, so they're going to lean left, but people who know the presidency say he was among the very worst presidents.
That's true, but I work with academics, and I can tell you they don't only lean left, but they're infected with bias. I'd like to hear from
Also,
Debbie or
one
Sasha,
more
what do
thing
you
about
guys think?
gas prices. We are
Yeah,
pumped.
Debbie was in the
We're-
political lane. So,
we're-
Debbie, what is your thoughts around this conversation and everything? And I was going to bring up something.
A few things. So first of all, I certainly don't agree that young people are narcissistic, selfish, lazy, and all the rest of it. That has not been my experience. And so I am still way in favor. And the leader of the happiest country in the world is a female millennial. And the leaders most of the leaders in the 5 happiest countries in the world are millennials or whatever that Gen X. They're young. And so I don't buy that. I don't buy that in this country or anywhere else in the world. I want to see younger people leading and at least giving them a chance to try leading. And as far as folks not voting, they are abdicating. If you don't like this country, get over it and get on with it because it belongs to you. It is your country. It is a democracy. It is your responsibility to take care of it, to make it work. And people did die for that. So get off your butt, get off your high horse, and go do your job as a citizen and get involved.
If you're not voting, you're a Russian dupe. Putin has spent.
Why are we going off on
$200
Russia? Hasn't Vladimir Putin been through enough?
Vladimir
Well,
Putin.
Vladimir Putin. Hasn't he suffered enough?
Not
That
yet.
poor man.
He's done a lot of suffering. He's
I
caused a lot
wish
of
I had a
suffering.
red
He
button
hasn't
right
taken
now.
it.
Beautiful.
Putin has
I
spent
wish I had the red button.
Putin has spent $300 million over the past decade using social media to destabilize Western democracies,
Yeah, of
to
course.
increase division and demoralization.
Of course.
And it's one of the greatest bargains to be had, driving people crazy via
The old
social
playbook,
media. It's,
right.
Hey, speaking
Why
of
do you guys
division,
think
I
we
want
have
to
a
come. Speaking of division, I
democracy?
want
We
to come to
don't have
something
a
Kim brought up
democracy.
in chat and everything, because there has been a lot of discussions around the influx of immigrants, and I think Adam brought it up earlier and everything. And I have heard people say that we need to prosecute them. Earlier on our other show, we mentioned the DACA and what is going on with DACA and how that has now been ruled, I think, illegal by the courts and all along those lines. But the question is being asked is, are we doing enough, one, to prosecute those that are bringing the criminal element? And it sounds to me, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school because you did bring it up in chat, but it sounds like you're bringing up the possibility of maybe having public hangings again and all along those lines and in that space. So I'm just wondering, is that something that we want? Do we want public hangings and all along those lines? Or is this just something that we are never going to do again? Because that was not very good.
I get, back in history, you wanted to ward people off. What do? You just hang your enemies up, right? But I worked with one of the directors of Homeland
like
Security.
Putin.
And one of his concerns, he worked in forensics. He also took charge of the transportation department. But one of his concerns that just irritated him was that they would have these illegals, they would arrest them for doing whatever they were doing. They had them, but attorneys would come in and go, no, they have rights. We have to release them. And, his thing and his people basically were saying, well, they never come back. And so you're basically just kind of giving all of they knew they were illegal. They had no means of being here, no reason to be here. They were doing things illegal, probably killed somebody or pushing drugs or running guns. And he couldn't hold them. Attorneys made him release these people, and then they would never come back to trial. They were, disappear among all of the other cockroaches in America. And I hate saying it that way, but that's what they are. They are the evil. They are the ones who come over here.
Kim, I asked you this on a phone call, and I'd love to hear Adam's response. So what I'm going to say is that, and I know there are others that might agree with me, others that might disagree with me, but is the government partially to blame, and are they not being complacent? Because as I've said on several shows, and I'll say it again, you show me a drug operation that has the kind of drugs that you need in order to get these items from other countries, and I'm thinking that there has to be some government, if not actual cooperation, by actually bringing it here in different ways. There has to be some blind eyes turned and all along those lines. So I'm thinking that that
absolutely. We saw it at the airport.
Our government
absolutely.
What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. We saw it at the airport. We saw it at the gateways. A lot of heads are turned. It was very frustrating to him because, again, his hands were always tied because of who he reported to, but also his hands were tied because, that the law came in, attorneys came in and said, oh, no, these people have a right. And then he couldn't really hold them. He couldn't do anything with them or even ship them back. They had to wait until their hearing, which is wrong. Personally, I say if they're doing something wrong and they're illegal, there should be a law put in place. And I don't know if it is now or how we would enforce it, but there should be something in place where you can say, no, you're illegally here. You're doing illegal things. You've been caught. You don't get attorney representation. You do not get free representation. And, like I kind of said today, let's just hang them in the street to ward off all the other ones. But, just make them the example so people quit coming over here and doing it, period. And shipping them back doesn't do any good because they come right back. I
would like to say
problem is
okay, go ahead.
Fentanyl is the doses are so tiny that one person gets through with a kilo of fentanyl. That's hundreds of thousands of doses. A dose the size of 2 salt grains is enough to kill you. So 2 milligrams will kill you.
Yeah, but
It's a crisis in the country.
Rick, that has
It
been
can't be
going on.
minimized.
Rick, that's been going on for a while because the movie that I was referring to, it came out like 15 years ago. Adam was probably a teenager at that time, but he probably heard the movie because he's definitely a cultural student as well. But it was a movie called American Gangster, and it was actually about somebody from right here in North Carolina. Frank Lucas was a gangster from LaGrange, North Carolina, and he literally smuggled heroin into the United States in American service planes, and while returning from Vietnam. I want to say that some of those were also smuggled through coffins and all along those lines. So I'm thinking that they did it in that time frame, that they're probably still able to do it now, because we do have people that are coming from various parts and they are finding very innovative ways to get stuff here. And I'm thinking that there has to be some, as I said earlier, cooperation from some of our government agencies in order
you
for that to happen.
Yeah, you can't use bulk force methods alone are not sufficient. Just building a wall isn't sufficient. You need high tech. Ideally, somebody wants to come into America, you inject a chip into them, an RFID chip, so you always know where
That
they
works
are.
for me.
But
That's
there
what he
are
came to me
objections
for.
to that.
That's
There are
why he
civil-
came to me, was for my patented technology for that. And pretty much he was constantly told that would be against their rights. But they have no right. To me, they should have no rights in this country. If you're
each
here,
side,
right, you should have.
each side has objections. Liberals
What?
have objections because of civil liberties. Conservatives historically have objected to stuff like that because they say that's the mark of the beast. When everybody is marked, that's part of end times. Now, I don't know I haven't heard that come up in like a decade. But I haven't heard people saying we should just chip everybody either.
Jerry Falwell's dead.
I
now.
wear one all the time.
Well, I think when it comes to immigration, there has to be a comprehensive solution. Of course, we have to secure the border, but you have millions of people in this country who are here illegally, who have families, who have jobs, and they shouldn't be deported. They should get a pathway to citizenship, and I would give them amnesty. The only people that I would deport are ones that are convicted of felonies, particularly violent ones. We have to be compassionate. We have to recognize we're not going to break up families and throw people out of this country. That's why I'm not a Republican, because, their policies, aren't reasonable in so many respects. And the same is true for Democrats. Like, where is the middle? Where has the middle gone where people can compromise? I bet I could compromise with every single one of you, because why don't we appreciate different perspectives and meet somewhere in the middle? Yes, we should secure the border, but are you going to tell a family that's with two kids that they're going to have to go back to Mexico when they're here trying to make a living? No. Why?
Bravo, Adam.
On that, I agree with
No,
you.
and I agree. I am not against the hardworking immigrants who come over here and they're trying to be good and they're doing good. And unfortunately, the idiots here, the Republicans here, took a young kid who was graduating top of his class. His parents, came over here. He was kind of not legal, but he'd gone to school since middle school here, or maybe even younger, and could speak English. You probably remember this story, Mark. And they shipped him back. They put him in jail just before graduation.
Well, I grew up in New England where people could talk to one another. Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts. Democrats and Republicans weren't these polar opposites. And it wasn't like if one side said A, the other said not A. The way it is now, we talked to each other and we didn't insult each other and we didn't call each other names. What we did is have policy disagreements and we tried to work them out. And we often achieved compromise. It was called working across the aisle. This has disappeared. It disappeared. Basically, Newt Gingrich took out a contract on America in the 90s, and he said all the Republicans in the House are going to have to stick together and vote the same way. So it didn't.
Hold on a second. I got to stop you there. I got to stop you there, Jim. Was it Newt Gingrich that started this mess and everything? Because I can go back even further than that. There was a certain senator here in North Carolina that was notorious for voting against stuff. That's why they called him Senator No.
John Edwards?
There was another one down in South Carolina that was very much.
I like John.
No, you're missing my point, Mark.
Before Newt Gingrich.
There are always bad
like
people
Helms
in
and
government.
Tom Thurmond.
You're missing
Newt
my point.
Gingrich
Newt
had
Gingrich
I know
organized
exactly
it.
who it is.
You got
Helms,
the House
Mr.
of
No.
Republicans to vote as a block. and there was no compromise.
I like John
No
Edwards.
Republican could go outside
That
of
was
it
nice.
because then they would not get reelected, and all of them knew it. And this has been a problem. Then the Tea Party started to take control of the Republican parties. The Republican Party, good for them, stood up to them, but they were a strong minority. But then Trump was elected president, and this MAGA craziness has taken hold, and the party is crazy now. It's
It's
not
just
like
us
the
and
old
them.
days.
That's all they say.
Well, wait a
Us and
second.
them.
Wait a second.
No, it's true, Adam. And if you can't see that, that's the problem that you and I are not going to compromise over because
Yes, we
I
will
not.
compromise because you're from New England and Cape Cod is one of the most favorite places I go to every summer. So we'll compromise on that basis alone. But I agree with you about Republicans, but the same is also true of the left. The left has been taken over by a fairly extreme element. I
That's
want
not
people
true.
like you,
That's a
James.
false
I want
dichotomy.
people like you
That's
and Rick
false.
who
What you're
seem
saying
to be
right now is
smart
false.
and moderate. And the
There's
two
no
best
MAGA
presidents in the
movement
last
in the
50 years
Liberal
that
Party.
exemplified
There's
that.
no MAGA movement.
Well, the two best
According-
presidents in the last 50 years who exemplified that are Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon. And they were the
According
two
to a
best.
Pew survey,
That's
Republican
false.
politicians have moved 4 times as far to the right as Democrats have moved to the left.
And that should be obvious to everyone.
It's mostly on the Republican side.
Joe
But I
Biden
think
is
It's
the
the basis
Hold
of
on a
it.
second.
There's
Hold on a second.
the
Hold on a
basis
second.
of
Before we get to
How it
that
works.
and everything, hold on. One thing I was going to ask is, and I was actually going to come back to something that Adam brought up earlier in our conversation, which is this kind of tit for tat, because y'all are kind of talking about that even now and everything. Because one of the things that former President Donald Trump said is that he has no idea, this was in the interview that he recently did with Megyn Kelly, as to whether the Republicans will vote to impeach President Joe Biden. But he does have a theory on what motivated House Republicans to launch a Biden impeachment inquiry. And it's one simple word. He said, revenge. They did it to me, is what he told folks in the hour-long interview. And had they not done it to me, I think,
And they
and
need to
nobody
grow up.
officially
But
said
Sasha,
this,
you got your
but
hand
I think they had not done it to me, perhaps you wouldn't have it being done to them. So he's arguing this notion of it being tit for tat. So what do y'all think about this tit for tat kind of
And
stuff that might be going
I
in
know,
politics?
Mark, but let's give Sasha a second
Yeah.
here.
Okay, before I leave, I have to leave earlier. I want to tell you from Canadian perspective, the immigration issue is treated completely differently in the United States, what appears to me, than in Canada. Now, Canada is blessed that there is no illegal immigration. Okay, there are some illegal immigrants, I'm pretty sure, but we are talking about a handful of people, so it's practically non-existent because of the natural. There is only one border with the United States, and there is oceans on both sides. So how you can come to Canada illegally? It's quite a challenge. Now, Canada needs immigrants. It's a huge territory, very little, the population of Canada is definitely not enough. We're talking about some 38 million people for such a huge territory. So we need immigrants, period. And the immigrants are arriving to Canada in large numbers, almost comparable to, if you're talking about legal immigration, I wouldn't be surprised if Canada is not too far behind from the United States, which is much more populous.
Just to give you
Canada
some
actually in
just to get some fuel to what
2021.
Sasha's saying, because I know Sasha's got to leave. I was just actually looking that up because I've always wondered this as well. According to the 2021 Canadian Census, immigrants in Canada are numbering about 8.3 million persons, and they make up approximately 23% of Canada's total population. So about 1 in 4 people are of immigrant descent in Canada, and they represent the 8th largest immigrant population in the world. With the proportion.
I have the figures for all of the countries, and we in the United States are at 13%, and we're not doing badly. We're up there, okay. We're not horrible, but the happiest countries, most of them have a higher rate of immigration, and they integrate their immigrants.
Yeah, integration is a very important point. I remember a few years ago when there was a huge immigration from Syria, including Canada. So how Canadians approach them? Remember that Syria is a multinational country. There are several nationalities. So, for example, there was a substantial Armenian community in Syria. So what they arranged that members of Armenian community here in Ontario and other provinces just as well, I'm more familiar with Ontario situation, they were invited, Syrian Armenian living in Syria to immigrate to Canada, and they were taking them in their houses. And they were boarding them for several months until they would learn language, get the job, and so on. And many more, not only these immigrants, but all over legal immigrants in Canada, they are much more prosperous comparatively to average Canadian in order jobs, the quality jobs. A lot of them are working in the field of their training and education and so on. So this is why in America is such a struggle. Now, let's talk about illegal immigration, which I'm not so much familiar, but still on a previous program, I just suggested, okay, it's a crime to come illegally to the United States. There is no doubt about that. But there is a crime and there is a punishment. What should be punishment for somebody who did illegally several years ago and established himself or herself and his family and working and producing? Okay, give them some, okay, you are familiar with business immigration. You pay $250,000 or $500,000 or so, and you're becoming legal immigrant. So these people, they can easily, after several years working in this country, they can easily pay this money, and even not, they can go to the bank and take a loan and pay this money. So United States would prosper to take money. Okay, it's like a punishment. Okay, you committed crime 9 years ago. Okay, it's time to pay for your crime. Unless you want to go back to your country, of course, nobody will go back to your country. So they will pay this money gladly, and they will arrange loan if they don't have all amount to pay. U.S. will get revenue from all these people.
So Sasha, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that, and y'all can say that I'm mishearing them. If I'm mishearing you, correct me. But there is a notion that exists within the immigrant community of people literally paying. There are folks that are called coyotes that they are paying them. So you're saying that the United States should go into the coyote business, and instead of paying the coyotes, the folks pay the government to bring them in to the country? Because that's what it sounded like you were saying. Because they're already paying.
You're mixing things up. I'm talking about the business immigration to not only to the United States, but to almost any country in the world. If you're bringing with you a certain amount of money, $250,000, $500,000. I think in Canada there is business immigration. You have to create, probably 5 jobs for Canadians and so on. I don't know exactly amount now. It's changing. Say $500,000 probably would do. If not, $1 million, whatever. But this is a business immigration. It's different. What I'm talking about, the people who came illegally, so obviously they didn't have $250,000 to bring in or so on, but they already came. It's a fact of life. They're already working. They have families, they students in schools and maybe in higher education or so on. So they committed a crime several years ago. No question asked. So there has to be a punishment. So why don't you have a punishment logical and beneficial to everyone? These people will gladly pay a certain amount of money to purge that crime that they've committed several years ago, so they could remain in a country of their choice, of their children now being raised, and so on. And that would solve all the issues, so these people would get legalized. United States will get infusion of capital. If you're talking about millions of illegal immigrants, you can calculate yourself how much money we are talking about here.
We're about to get, the world, and Canada particularly, is about to get hit with tens of millions. This show is supposed to be on world economics. In the next 25 to 30 years, we'll have close to 1 billion climate change refugees. The climate change is going to reshuffle the distribution of people all across the world. Right now, America has roughly, 12, 13 million undocumented immigrants, less than 4% of the population. They're demonized well beyond their numbers. But
Well, I mean, the numbers are even crazier less than Canada because I just looked it up. The estimate of undocumented immigrants, you heard me mention those millions of immigrants that exist, 25% of the population. But apparently, the undocumented immigrants in Canada range, depending on who you're listening to, between 35 and 120,000, which is a lot less than what exists here in the United States and everything. So, Sasha, why do y'all have such less undocumented immigrants?
Sorry, Marco, what's your question?
Why does Canada have such less undocumented immigrants? Because it seems like most of the immigrants are being documented and not undocumented, because there's a very low amount of undocumented immigrants from the figures I just quoted and everything.
Well, I've already explained, because it's difficulties to cross Canadian border. You have to arrive by ocean, which very few people are capable of doing, probably none. And then unless you jump from the cruise ship or something like that, I don't know how you do it. And the ocean is very cold around Canada. Also, another thing is, if you will go back a few hundred years ago, in the slave trade, slaves were very reluctant to come to Canada because of the cold climate. So this is why Canada had very, very little trade.
Gotta give you a little bit of pushback on that, because the Underground Railroad, Canada was one of the great destinations and everything. Now they might have backtracked to New York, but I do know that Harriet Tubman and
Who
others.
were the biggest slave owners in Canada? The indigenous people. They were enslaving.
No, I'm not saying that they were slaves going to Canada. I'm just saying that a lot of the Americans were going up to Canada. So a lot of the freedom was to Canada.
No, that's not true. The slaves were indigenous Canadian people, and they were enslaved by their own people. And the white people in Canada, who came predominantly first from France and then from England, they were horrified by this custom for the local people. And finally, they abolished that completely, made it illegal.
No, I think what you're talking about is the difference between Canada and the United States. And what I'm saying is that a lot of the United States slaves were actually trying to run to Canada, because Canada was seen as one of the great escape routes and everything.
If you're coming from Nicaragua, you're adding another 1,500 miles to your journey if you want to go across the United States and get to Canada. You're doubling your trip.
And you will not be able to settle in Canada from south countries like Nicaragua or so on. The climate in Canada is just too cold. This is it was cold even for slaves in the 18th, 19th centuries. So it's still cold there even now, although it's getting better with the climate change. Now we have very mild winter last year, and this year probably just.
Yeah, everybody should be buying property in Canada.
Absolutely. Canada is becoming a really nice country with the climate change. I'll tell you that.
Well, just the last thing, and then I'll leave that whole thing alone. But yeah, like I said, if we're talking about Harriet Tubman, who was one of the great leaders of the underground movement. Canada was definitely one of the destinations that she sent people to. As a matter of fact, that was one of the popular destinations that she sent folks to. Like I said, they might have backtracked, but they were definitely going up to Canada, and that was her route of freedom that she was sending folks to. And I want to say that even in her own end of life, she spent some time up there as well. So that's when my point was, that there was a number of the folks.
I mean, during the Vietnam War, people would run to Canada to avoid the draft. Right. But that's people who are already in America.
Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely. But that's
I would like to ask Debbie, you've mentioned a couple of times the happiest countries. I've got a feeling they're Scandinavian. Like, is Finland one of them, for example?
Yeah, the Scandinavians consistently for 20 years have been in the top 5. So Finland is number 1. They all, I think 3 of them have women in charge.
Yes, and they also have a kind of a mixed capitalism and socialism. They have a social support structure beneath them. And I think that can go a long way to help making their citizens feel happy. They do feel that, as you pointed out several times, even in Ireland, which was notoriously misogynistic, they have elected women presidents.
The other thing is
behind the United States.
They think the biggest single factor in happiness, although there are several things that correlate, women in office is a huge correlation, but the biggest single thing is corruption. because with the corruption, they don't trust the government. And I think
Correct.
that's one of our biggest issues here. We don't trust government. And when you
Trust.
don't trust government, you become disillusioned. And that's why it's so evil for people in government to be corrupt, because it destroys democracy and people don't vote. They give up. They get disillusioned.
All the happiest countries have populations of 1 to 7 million, which means we have a population of 1/3 of a billion. Those little countries can be politically sophisticated and nimble and elect young people and elect women. And the U.S. can't get happier until we have 2 functioning political parties. We're
Well,
already
how are the other big 2 countries doing, or continents doing, in terms of happiness? I mean, when you talk about billions of people, and I don't know the answer, Debbie, so if you know it, how are India and China doing in the sense of happiness? Because both of those,
They don't do very well. They're not very high up. I don't think I have them here on this particular chart I'm looking at. I was looking at my immigration chart. I'm not sure, but actually, what am I thinking? GDP is important, but it's not number one. Number one is how cohesive people are. It's whether they trust one another, whether they look after one another, whether they feel like there is a safety net, and whether they can trust their
I would like
government.
to add, you're talking about a country with very homogeneous population. There are almost.
Oh no, they're not. They're not. They have huge numbers of immigrants that they.
No, but these
that they
immigrants are
integrate.
very quickly becoming part of society. They very quickly learn language.
They're
and
homogenous in the sense that they integrate, but they're not homogenous at all. Far
I will
from it.
guarantee you they are countries that America has not interfered with.
Well,
Um,
I
But
mean,
isn't there
You know what's
decent-
interesting? There are countries that have a history of virtue. Most of them did not have slavery. They have cycles of virtue, where we have cycles of corruption. And the two, you tend to go the way you've been going. And it's hard to break a cycle of corruption. And cycles of virtue tend to continue as well.
Well, we are taught in the United States that you get up to the top by stepping on someone else's neck. And that's not a virtue, and it's not taught in other countries. That cooperation is the C word rather than capitalization or capitalism, that can be another way that your society can benefit.
But
And when the society-
Jim, we're also taught in
Everyone is happy.
particularly the West, that you are supposed to work like 14, 16-hour days, oftentimes for somebody else, and all along those lines.
And
Because
end
as
up
I
with a
said
broken
on
marriage
several
and
shows,
resentful children.
this both on Pod TV, both my own as well as some of these news shows, that there is a differentiation to me between a career and a job. And I think a lot of people are doing the zombie version, and I don't know if Adam agrees with me, of going to work because they are having to go to work to pay the bills. And they don't necessarily love the job that they are doing. They are just going because they have to pay the bills.
when it comes to the World Happiness Index, I'm not quite sure how they're measuring happiness, but I'll tell you where people are happy. They're happy in Singapore with a benevolent dictator.
They are.
And I have always said a benevolent dictator is better than a democracy. We don't have a democracy here. About 30% of the population votes in elections, and politicians are in the pockets of the NRA and any other and people who donate the most money. So I don't really consider it
Pharmaceutical industry.
Well, actually,
I do
this
think
is a
that-
great point, and it's worth another show. However, I had a Chinese friend who told me that the best government is good emperor, the worst government is bad emperor. So
That's right.
Be careful what you wish for.
That's right.
So
I would
here's
say on
Singapore is
future
the
shows there
happiest
should be a
Asian
rule.
country.
For
by
future
far.
shows, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, Singapore and Taiwan are the happiest Asian countries.
Exactly.
They have a ton of money. It's crazy rich Asians. Their economies are super powerful.
And they had a
They got-
great dictator for many years. And I think on future shows, one thing we want to be careful of is, let's stop bullying Mr. Putin. Hasn't he been through enough? Really?
I'm feeling very
He's
sorry
been through
for him.
so much. I mean, really.
Let's don't be
The
a
Russian
Putin.
national anthem is
I'm brushing a tear out of my eye right now.
So, but here's the thing: we're at the top of the hour. Real quick, a round robin. We'll start with Adam, since how he, Nick, you want to put him back? So let's start with Adam and tell me, if you were president, what would you do right now to make a change to make us move towards being a better America? Not Trump or anybody else. You.
I would appoint moderate people to positions of power, and I would grow the middle, and I would grow the middle class. But we need people who in leadership who know how to compromise, who know how to work across the aisles, who are reasonable, and who really care about helping people. People go into public service because they want to help people and make a difference. We need leaders like that. leaders who are going to compromise, be in the middle, and do what's right for the purpose of helping people rather than just being career politicians.
Thank you, Rick. What would you do if you were
I'd
president?
appoint a bunch of celebrities to my cabinet because everybody likes celebrities. I'd make Taylor Swift Secretary of Women's Affairs. I'd make The Rock Secretary of Health and Nutrition because they're loved by both liberals and conservatives, and we'd maybe get some more, like Adam said, we got to push people to the middle. I would require news stations to be fact checked in real time. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. There's something running down the side of the screen that when somebody says something, somebody's typing away saying, well, that's only half true.
I agree. I think that's beautiful. Debbie.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with Adam. I think we've got this silent majority, and they do vote, and their votes do count if they vote. And I think I would appoint young people. I would appoint more young people. Of course, women, I've said that already, but I would appoint more young people. And I would also get those young people to look seriously at what we are going to do about the issues of cartels coming into the United States. That's a huge, big, serious problem.
Huge. Thank you so much for that. Sasha?
I would bring half celebrities, where I agree with Rick, and I would bring the other half politicians from Scandinavian countries to really rule the way they rule over there, and so people are happy there. By the way, I've checked Norway. There is a very small percentage of immigrants who were born outside of Norway. It's a very small number, really. So, and they were all very quickly being assimilated, and that makes a huge difference. It's the same thing, for example, black people in Canada. There are black people in Canada, but they are not from the United States. They are from Caribbean region. And they are very different people. They're very polite. They are rule-obedient people, and there is absolutely no friction between them and the rest of the population. So that makes a lot of difference. Thank you.
That's very beautiful. And Jim?
Yes, well, I would say that the first characteristic has to be charisma. I need a leader. I need people that believe in this leader. And I need this leader to believe in the Declaration of Independence and that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I would also like to have him point out why we were given the Statue of Liberty by the French, because we want the poor, the huddled masses, and we will be there for them in their time of need. And this is what America means to the rest of the world. At one point in time, we've lost our sense of way. We've lost our way. We've lost the ability to be there for others. And this is what leadership is all about. You don't say you're better than, you say I can help you be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's a beautiful presidential speech, by the way. Take it. Mark, I'm going to let you wrap, and I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next
Before
Tuesday.
we wrap, we got to get a short.
Well, I want you to do your presidential thing too. I want you to do.
I will. I was going to end with mine, but I want you to say yours before I get to mine and all along those lines. So, Kim, it's on you before I do the wrap and all along those lines. So, what would some of your political decisions be?
So my most powerful political decision would be to get our country under control financially. I would probably fire the IRS, put in some really good financial minded people, put in a blockchain system so that we collect money that way and no hands touch it. And then it's programmed to disperse where it needs to go. I would get rid of the medical insurance companies today as they are, put in a blockchain payment system and make it equal for everyone to be able to obtain insurance that does not deny them. And then I would work on getting rid of a lot of the criminals that we have in this country, and that would start in the government and then work our way out into the communities where the cartel are coming in. And I posted on my Facebook what I would have done to them. So, and I don't think it's appropriate to say on TV. So, but that would be how I begin, is start getting us under control financially and get rid of the sticky fingers and make it all systematic, because that's truly what artificial intelligence should have been used for.
No problem. And to get to mine and all along those lines, definitely there has to be some serious restructuring going on in a number of things we've talked about on other shows here on Pod TV, but we've got to restructure the criminal justice system. It is a total joke, and it is totally very much biased on a lot of different ways. So that is something that needs restructuring. I've had several of my friends that have been complaining about their housing situation. So definitely that needs to be examined, and we need to figure out a way to get better housing and more affordable housing. So affordable housing, a restructuring of the criminal justice system, a restructuring of the health system, and a number of other things would be things that I would be looking at, because all of those are things that need to be addressed. And even to Adam's point, I think that we got to look at what we are doing on the educational side as well, because there are a number of things that we are not teaching that we should be teaching and that need to be taught, whether that is vocational, whether that is fiscal literacy, or whether that is a number of other things. And then last but not least, because it's very important, well, two things. One, next week, Adam will be the featured Pod TV representative. I've already decided that. So Adam will be the featured one on next week. So y'all can vote for Adam. Right now, Oscar the Grouch is still leading, and all we'll see if he loses the lead and all in that space. But my celebrity, and this Adam will like as well, since he referenced them and some other people referenced her as well. But I think my celebrity or the cultural representative will be Taylor Swift. And then I'll figure out two of the Republicans and Democrats to go with Adam and Taylor Swift. So we'll figure out whether Adam beats Taylor Swift and whether he beats those other political folks as well. And the other thing I was going to say is that if I was to be president, I like this notion of the celebrities, but we got some great experts here on Pod TV. So I'm thinking that even though he is from another country, so we would have to bend some rules, but I think that Sasha would be a great person to run the Department of Treasury and all along those lines. I think that definitely she's done some great work in terms of understanding cities. So I'm thinking that Debbie could run some of the departments that are doing city relationships and all along those lines. I'm thinking that Jim could definitely have some great opportunities in a number of things, including education. I think I'll make him the head of the Department of Education and all in that space. Adam is a lawyer. We need some folks in the judicial system. So I'm thinking that Adam Lamparello, if I'm the one elected president, is my attorney general and all in that space. And of course, Rick Rosner, I'm going to make you Secretary of State. So I'm thinking that's what we're going to have going on and all along those lines. And, you know, you've got all that experience in engineering and all in that space. And so I think I need a technological czar. That is you, Kim Calhoun. So like I said, we've got all of these parts here. There are other folks that can have offices that are not here that have expertise and all in that space. So I think we can create an entire cabinet just off of the folks that come on Pod TV and all along those
lines. You'd have an attorney general that never wore a shirt. That's...
Well, RFK Jr. never wears a shirt.
Exactly. It could be quite interesting. I mean, y'all do not know her, but we have a show on Monday, Dr. Anthony. I'm thinking that Dr. Giovanni Anthony is very much into education, so she can run the Department of Education. So that could be something else going on. So we can have running different departments and all along those lines. Jatovi, who is on our edition, our World Edition, is in the gaming space, so he can do some things in the sports lane and in the gaming lane and all along those lines. Maybe we'll have him run the FCC. And all in that space. Like I said, I think we can find somebody for just about every department. And like I said, there might be having to be some bending of the rules because I think you're supposed to be a U.S. citizen, but we'll find a way to get Sasha to be our Department of Treasury and all in that space. So we'll find a way to bend those rules and all along those lines.
It'll be derivative trading.
Thank you very much. We'll see you guys.
Great show. And actually, if you stick around, right about now, because it just started, Coco McMillan is actually doing her show. It's actually a repeat of last week. She'll be back live next week, but it was a very powerful interview with an R&B singer that has got some new stuff that has been released, and it was a very good conversation in addition to a conversation with a minister friend of hers as well. So there'll be a little bit of things on the religious side and on the music side, and that is going on till about 7:10, and then later on at 8 o'clock, we've got Billy Graham coming with some business advice because he is a business coach and all along those lines. So not Billy Graham, the former evangelist and all of that space, but our version of Billy Graham and all along those lines. So we got some more great programming coming back, and we'll see you here on World Politics on Tuesday. So
nice meeting you, Adam and Debbie.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.